Hello Infiniteers, and welcome back to my Monsters Inc. toy box. Today I'm going to show you how to hook up the logic for the Scare Challenge, which you saw back in episode 1 of this series. This game is something that my fellow YouTuber Papa H came up with, and I was able to figure out how to implement the logic for it. And I know he's really eager to see how I did it. Now, the game is inspired by the competition between Sully and Randall, which we see in the original movie, and the idea is to earn the most points by generating the most energy. You can do that by either getting the child to scream or making them laugh. A scream gives you guaranteed points, but a laugh can give you more points, provided that the child thinks your joke was funny. The joke is the riskier play because if the joke backfires, you can make the child cry instead of laugh, and you don't earn any points. So depending on the choices that you make and the amount of points you will randomly earn, you never know for sure who's going to win the game. So what's nice about the Monsters University figures is that their ranged attack is a scare, and that fits this game perfectly. So let me come out of these doors over here, and I've set up a little rail target here just to demo something for you. So when you do the ranged attack for the Monsters Inc. characters, they do a scare. As I said, that fits perfectly with the theme of this challenge. The problem is that this particular ranged attack, unlike the ranged attacks for other characters, has a very limited range. We need to be able to hit a target with our ranged attack so that we know when we've scared the child. And the problem is, if we're standing too far away, it doesn't do anything. You can kind of see how far away I am. I can get a little closer, nothing happens. A little closer, nothing happens. We've got to be close enough so that it actually registers. And so in order to ensure that the player is close enough for the scare to work, I had to use a little extra logic, and you're going to see that as we go. But I wanted to show you that just so you understand what I'm doing when we get to the logic in the bedrooms. Alright, so let me go ahead and delete that rail target, because we don't need that anymore. That was just for a demo. And by the way, I've put down all the Creativitoys that I need ahead of time. I'm going to show you those in a moment. But look at the memory meter on the right. If you remember what it was at the end of the last episode, we were below the activity meter, which was the second meter from the top there. And so just putting down these Creativitoys has taken up a lot of memory, and we haven't even hooked them up yet. So this is why I left so much memory available in this toy box, because I knew the logic was going to take up a lot of memory. But the logic for the Scare Challenge can be divided up into 4 areas or 4 categories. First, we have the core challenge maker logic, which sets up the game and shuts it down at the end. We have the logic for the scare floor doors so that you can enter and leave the bedrooms. And then in the bedrooms, we have the logic for scaring the child and the logic for doing the joke and attempting to make the child laugh. So there's 4 different areas of the logic here that we need to hook up. And by the way, before we get too far into this, I want to let you know that I have logic diagrams on my blog that should help you out. I'll put the link in the video description. As you can see, there's a lot of logic to this game, so it will really help you out if you follow along on the diagrams as we go. But don't be intimidated by this. There is a lot of logic, but it's not difficult to hook up, and I'm going to walk you through it step by step. Alright, so let's review the Creativitoys that I've placed ahead of time. I have placed a challenge maker over here, and most of these toys I have only placed out of the Creativitoys drawer. I have not modified them at all. So we have the challenge maker. I have a logic gate and a scoreboard. For each of the doors, I have a checkpoint that I've placed, and notice the location of the red dot on that checkpoint and how it's placed in relation to the shadow. Notice too, I've placed a trigger area around the door, and I've had to size that trigger area. This is one that I put down that I did not size, so I just placed this with its default size, and notice where I put the little marker here in the lower left corner. All right? So to size the door appropriately, you grab the marker in the upper corner there, go down 1 nudge, go left 2 nudges, and go toward the door 2 nudges. All right? And that gives you the size that you need for the trigger area around the door. And then I also placed a locator in front of that door with a little blue dot facing the door, and I placed another one over here in front of that door. So I'm only using the first 4 doors. The other 2 doors at the other end I did not use. And again, I would have liked to have used those and had 3 bedrooms per player, but you can see if I had done that, I would be really hurting on memory right now. So that's why I did not do that. I could only do 4 bedrooms. All right, so that's the toys that I placed in here. Outside, I have my level starter and a button that I've put down for invoking that. We have our sound generator, and this is out of the gameplay toys. We have an action enforcer, and I have 2 logic gates here with a little decoration from the decorations drawer. This is the logic gate that we're going to use to set up the game. This is kind of the reset. If the player plays the game multiple times, they'll need this. And this is the logic gate that's going to do all the cleanup. All right, and then for every room, we have a bunch of Creativitoys. All right, so inside the room, I have a trigger area that I've set up around the automatic door. This is the same size as the ones at the scare floor doors. I have a checkpoint that I've placed here, and again, notice the placement of the little red dot in the corner there. That's important because we want the player facing the right direction when they come into the room. I have placed a locator up here above the bed and a rail target point directly below that, and this is actually sitting right on the floor. Right on the ground. We have a trigger area around the bed. This is the default size of the trigger area. And we have a green dungeon pickup. And this is out of the gameplay toys. That's our little collectible we're going to use. Outside of the room, we have a few sets of controls. So I have a randomizer and 2 time delayers and a couple more randomizers. I have a time delayer and another time delayer and a randomizer and a friendly wave generator. We have a logic gate back here. We have a time delayer out here by the door. And we have one by each door. And then we have a logic and. All right. So these 2 rooms are going to be for player 1. Completing the door, or completing the room, will invoke the time delayers, which will invoke the logic and. And when that's complete, that tells the challenge maker that the player 1 is done with their part of the challenge. But again, every room has the same toys. So as you can see, we've got our locator, our rail target, our green dungeon pickup and trigger area, our checkpoint and our trigger area. I've got the same collection of toys that I had over here. This collection of toys is repeated here for this room, and then there's the logic gate. Same thing with this. Logic gate, one collection of toys, the other collection of toys. Over here, same thing. Logic gate, one collection of toys, another collection of toys. Trigger or a time delayer in front of each automatic door with a logic and. Okay, so every room has those same set of toys. All right, let's start off easy. And we'll do the challenge maker first. This is kind of the standard stuff that you do. So on the challenge maker, we will go into the properties, and most of the stuff under here is the same. We're going to leave all of these set the way they are, and I'm not going to change anything here. On the scoreboard, for the properties on that, I'm going to set the score to the maximum number possible. We're never actually going to score that high, but that just guarantees we don't have a problem. Oops. And that will leave off. Both of those will leave on. Alright, so on the challenge maker, we're going to do a new locator connection. We're going to have player 1 start here. And these two doors will be player 1's. On the challenge maker, a new locator connection. Player 2 will start in front of this door, and those will be player 2's doors. On the challenge maker, a new logic connection. On invites accepted, there are two things that we want to, or actually just one thing we want to do, sorry, with the scoreboard here. We want to reset it. On the challenge maker, a new logic connection. When the game is started, we want to activate the scoreboard. New logic connection. When the game is ended, there's two things we want to do with the scoreboard. First thing is we want to deactivate it. I also want to take it off the screen. So on the challenge maker, a new logic connection. On game ended, again, I would like to come over here, but it will not let me connect the same logic signal to a different trigger on this. So we have to go through this logic gate. So we'll input into that. And on the logic gate, we'll do an output. And we'll tell the scoreboard to remove itself from the display. So that logic gate's just a pass-through. And then we also want to do a new score results connection and connect that to the scoreboard so we can see the score, the final score at the end. All right, one other thing we want to do is on the level starter, I want to do a new logic connection on catalyze. I want to come over to the scoreboard and I want to remove it from the display so that it's off by default when we come in the toy box. So a new logic connection on the button when pressed, and we'll use this to invoke the level starter just so we can kind of test things out as we build it. And that just again makes sure that display stays off. Alright, and that's it for the scoreboard, except for the scoring when we get to the actual game. Alright, on the challenge maker, a new logic connection. Let's see what we want to do here next. Let's go into invites accepted. We want to come over to the logic gate over here. And we want to input. And again, this is going to reset all of the bedrooms for the new game. And likewise, new logic connection on game ended. We want to come over to this logic gate and do the cleanup. And I'm using these two logic gates just because it's going to make it a lot easier to hook things up out here if I don't have to keep running through this wall and coming back here to the challenge maker. Alright, now for the doors on the scare floor. On the challenge maker, we're going to do a new logic connection. You're going to do this for every door. I'm only going to show you the first one. But on invites accepted, you want to come over to the trigger area for every door, and you want to activate it. All right? And on the challenge maker, a new logic connection. On game ended, you want to come over to the trigger area and deactivate it. Okay? So if the challenge isn't running, you want this off, because you don't want the player to come here and go into the bedrooms if the game's not running. So when the game starts, on invites accepted, turn it on. When the game is ended, turn it off. Make those same two connections for every one of these trigger areas. All right? And on the level starter, new logic connection on catalyze. We want to turn off the trigger areas, deactivate them. Make that same connection for the other 3 trigger areas in here as well. And then come out to the button and push the button, and that'll make sure that all of those trigger areas are off. All right? Okay, so that sets up these trigger areas. Now, when we get ready to do this, we're going to be using the checkpoints to teleport the players between the scare floor doors and the bedrooms. There's one checkpoint here in front of each of the doors, and there is one checkpoint in each of the bedrooms. So you're going to tie each of the doors to each of the bedrooms. Okay, so for this one, let's do the properties first. The properties on all of these are going to be set the same way. Okay, so you're going to leave this set to none. On contact, you're going to leave it set for individual players. And available for, the first 2 here are going to be for player 1. All right, and you're going to want to hide this by default. Okay, I'm going to leave this on just so that we can hook these up, but before you start the game, you're going to want to turn those off so the player doesn't see these. Okay, so for this one, you're going to set this one for player 1, available for player 1, and these 2 you're going to set for player 2. Only player 2 is going to use these. And same thing with this one. And you get the idea. Okay. So this door here, let's send that to the first bedroom. So on this trigger area, a new logic connection, when entered by player 1, only player 1 can use this door. We're going to come over here to this teleporter, and we're going to teleport the player here, player 1. Okay? And on each of these, you're going to set the properties here the same way. So this is only available for player 1. Before you're done, make sure you mark the hidden flag. Okay? This one you're going to set for player 1. This one set for player 2. This one set for player 2. Okay. On this trigger area, this is in the bedroom. So, new logic connection when entered by player 1. We're going to come over to this checkpoint for the corresponding door, and we'll teleport the player there. So that brings them, that brings them back. Okay? The other thing we want to do, and you'll notice it made multiple connections there, and don't worry about the other connections. You can delete them or you can leave them, it doesn't matter. If you come in here, you'll notice there's 4 connections. Player 1 is the only one we really want, so you could delete these other 3 or leave them. The other thing we want to do on this trigger area is a new logic connection when entered by player 1. We want to come over and deactivate this trigger area for that door, because we only want them going through that door one time. They can't keep going back and forth to the same room. Okay? All right. Now, on the level starter here, we're going to do a new logic connection on catalyze. And what I want to do on each of these checkpoints is turn them off. All right? And what that's going to do, if you don't turn them off and the player walks over top of these, it changes it into a checkpoint. So if the player dies, they respawn here. We don't want that behavior. So we need to turn every one of those off. all 4 of those in front of the scare floor doors. We also want to come over here and turn all of these off inside the bedrooms. Okay? Now that just makes sure they're not being used as checkpoints. We're only using them to teleport the player back and forth from the bedrooms. Alright, the last thing we want to do on this trigger area for the bedroom is a new logic connection when entered, in this case by player 1. I want to invoke this time delayer. We'll start the delay. And we're going to leave the property on this set to the default value of 1 second. Okay? And then on the time delayer, a new logic connection on delay completed, we will input into this gate. Again, this room over here is going to be for player 1 as well. So when player 1 leaves this room through that trigger area, you're going to make the same connection there to this time delayer, and the same connection from this time delayer to input into this logic AND. And on the logic AND, when it's complete and the player has finished both bedrooms, we come over here and we log player 1's completion. Alright? Now for these 2 bedrooms, you're going to be hooking up the checkpoints and the trigger areas in the bedroom and on the scare floor over there for player 2. So again, these 2 doors here are going to lead to those 2 bedrooms. To this bedroom and this bedroom. And you're going to hook those doors and checkpoints up just like I did with that first bedroom. Coming out of this bedroom, we'll invoke this time delayer, which will input into this logic AND. Coming out of this bedroom, we'll input to that time delayer, which will input into this logic AND. And on completion from this logic AND, we're going to come over to the checkpoint, or to the challenge maker, and log player 2's completion. So that's how we wrap up the game. So hopefully that was not too difficult to follow. All right, but that's the logic that you need for these doors. Again, you're going to hook this one up the same way that I did this one for player 1, and you're going to hook these 2 up the same way, but these are for player 2. Each door goes to a unique bedroom. Hopefully that's clear to follow. Alright, so that takes care of the scare floor doors. Now, before we get to the bedrooms, let's do a little bit more housekeeping here. On the level starter, we're going to do a new logic connection on catalyze. We want to come over to each and every one of these automatic doors and close them so that they don't open automatically. Make that same connection from the level starter to each of the automatic doors on the bedrooms. So we don't want the player getting out of those bedrooms into this area out here. Okay? And we've already turned off the checkpoints again, so make sure you turn off the checkpoints here in the bedrooms and on the scare floor. Make sure you deactivate all of the scare floor trigger areas from the level starter like I showed you. And we already removed the scoreboard display. So that's everything that the level starter has to do. Alright, and I think we are done with the scare floor doors. Okay. So now, initializing the bedrooms. At the start of the game, we got to set those bedrooms up. I've already configured the wave for each of the friendly wave generators. So this one, let me just show you what I did. This is just to save time from scrolling through that list. The first bedroom is going to be dippers. Okay? And these townspeople are just representing kids. This one here, for this I used Woody. So that would kind of be like Andy dressed up in Woody's costume. For this one here, for the girls' bedroom, I'm using Lilo. And for this one over here, I'm using Slightly. Again, you can use whatever townspeople you want to represent the kids. Alright. Now this logic gate, which is going to set up all of the bedrooms, this has to do a number of things. So the first thing we want to do is a new logic connection on output. We want to come over to each and every one of the trigger areas for the beds and activate them. So all 4 trigger areas for the beds need to be activated. That's because when we're done, they'll all be deactivated. So we need to make sure they're all on. So make that same connection for all 4 trigger areas on the beds. Second thing we need to do is a new logic connection on output. We want to turn off all of the rail slide targets. We want those to be invisible. Make that same connection for all of the other rail slide targets. So 4 connections. On this logic gate, a new logic connection on output. We want to come over to each of the friendly wave generators and generate those waves. And on the friendly wave generators, you're going to want to do a new locator connection and connect up the friendly wave generator to the locator that's over the bed. That'll spawn the child here who will drop down onto the bed. So you're going to connect up this friendly wave generator to that locator, this friendly wave generator to that locator, this friendly wave generator here to that locator. Okay? And on each of the friendly wave generators, you want to set the properties. And all of these are going to be set the same way. So take the generation delay to 0. And let me get to my notes here. We're going to leave all of these properties off. That's set to none. On the generated friend options, set the behavior to sleep. Okay? That'll make them sleep in the beds. So set up all of the other 3 properties on the friendly wave generators the same. And then make the same logic connection here to generate the wave for all 4 of those friendly wave generators. All right, now the next thing that this logic gate needs to do is a new logic connection on output. We want to reset every one of the green dungeon pickups. Okay, that will make it visible. Make that same connection for that one, for that one, and for that one. And then a new logic connection on output. The last thing we want to do is reset the logic and. Make that same connection for the other logic and over here. If you don't reset that, then you won't be able to finish the game if you play it a second time. So that's everything that this needs to do to set up all of those bedrooms. Okay? On the cleanup, at the end of the game, there's a couple things this needs to do. So a new logic connection on output. You want to come over and defeat all 4 of the waves for the friendly wave generators. That takes all 4 children back out of the toy box. And you want to do a new logic connection on output. You want to hide all of the dungeon pickups. Okay? So those are the 2 things that the cleanup needs to do. If you want, you could have that also deactivate all of these trigger areas, but you don't really need to do that. That will happen automatically as the player plays the game. Okay, so that's everything that those 2 gates need to do. Now, for the bedroom, I am only going to show you how to hook up one bedroom, okay? Because it's going to take a little bit of time. All of the bedrooms get hooked up the same way. So you can re-watch what I do here and do all of the other bedrooms the same way. Again, there's 2 things the player could do in each bedroom. They could try to scare the child, or they could try to make them laugh. We're going to use the green dungeon pickup to initiate the joke. So if the player picks this up, that tells us they want to do the joke. If the player comes into the trigger area here and approaches the bed, that tells me they want to do the scare. Okay? And the space around the bed, represented by the trigger area, is what's going to guarantee that the player is close enough to this rail slide target to invoke it. So let's do the scare part of this first. So remember, we turned this off by default from this logic gate. Okay? So it's hidden. So if the player approaches the bed and they enter this trigger area, on the trigger area, we're going to do a new logic connection. When entered by player 1 in this case, we'll come over to our rail slide target and turn it on. All right. The other thing is we only want to do this once. So if they decide that they want to do this green dungeon pickup, they might still enter this trigger area and in the process of that. So we want to make sure we turn that off so that they can't come in here and turn this on and do the scare also. So on the trigger area, we're going to do a new logic connection. When entered by player 1, we'll come over to this little logic gate here and input. And on output from this gate, we'll turn around and deactivate the trigger area. Okay. On the other bedrooms, that's what this logic gate is for, that's what this logic gate is for, and that's what this logic gate is for. All right. Okay, and that's it for the trigger area. We're just using that to know when the player's close enough to use this, and when they are, we turn this on. Now when the player does their scare, that will hit the rail slide target. So on the rail slide target, a new logic connection. When this is hit, we want to do two things. First thing we want to do is hide the green dungeon pickup, because we don't want to let them do both. You can scare or you can try to make them laugh. You can't do both. All right. The other thing we want to do is kick off the scoring and the behavior for this. And there's several things that want to happen as a result of this. First, I want the kid to sit up in bed and kind of scream. And then I want them to faint because of the scare. So we're going to need to use a few time delayers to make this happen, so that everything is spaced out accordingly. You don't want all that happening at the same time. So on the rail slide target, a new logic connection. When that is hit, we're going to come over here to this time delayer. And these controls here are for the scare. These are going to be for the joke. All right. So on this time delayer, we'll start that delay. And on the properties for this time delayer, we're going to set the delay time to half a second, 0.5. Okay. So on these other bedrooms, these are the controls for the scare. These are the controls for the joke. These are the controls for the joke. These are the controls for the scare. The joke, the scare, they're the same controls, right? So what I'm doing here, you'll do for the other bedrooms. Now on this time delayer, a half a second after the player does their scare, we want the child to react. And so what we're going to do here is a new logic connection. On the delay completed, we'll come over to our friendly wave generator, and under the generated friend options, we're going to play looped, and we're going to have the player sit up, or the child sit up. Okay, that's their initial reaction. And then we're going to kick off another time delayer from that first one and start that delay. This one we're going to change to a second and a half. Okay. And when this one finishes, new logic connection, when the delay is completed, we're going to come over to our friendly wave generator, go to the generated friend options, play looped, and have the child faint. Okay. So the player hits the rail slide target. Half a second later, the kid sits up. The other thing we want to do on this is have them scream. So a new logic connection on delay completed from the half-second time delayer. We'll come over to the sound effect generator, and under the vocal category, we'll do the fun scream. And by the way, make sure on the properties for the sound generator that 3D sound at speaker or locator is turned off. So the monster scares the child. Half-second later, they sit up in bed and scream. A second and a half later, after the scream finishes, they faint. So that's the child's reaction. The other thing on this time delayer is a new logic connection. When the delay is completed, we're going to invoke this randomizer. And this is what's going to tell us how many players or how many points that we earned for the scare. So on this randomizer, we'll do a new logic connection on random trigger 1. We'll come over to our scoreboard. We'll increment by 3 the score for player 1. New logic connection on that randomizer on random trigger 2. Come over to the scoreboard and we'll increment by 4 the score for player 1. And on the randomizer, a new logic connection on random trigger 3. We will increment by 5 the score for player 1. So the player can earn 3, 4, or 5 points guaranteed for a scare. All right? So that's the scare logic. So hopefully that was pretty easy to follow. All right. Now for the other side of this, for the joke attempt, that's going to use this set of controls. Okay? So on the green dungeon pickup, let me get over to my notes for this. We're going to do a new logic connection. When this collectible is broken or collected, first thing we want to do is deactivate this trigger area. And we also want to hide that rail slide target. Make sure that's hidden, because again, the player cannot do both. So we'll turn that back off. All right, on the green dungeon pickup, a new logic connection. When this is broken or collected, we're going to invoke this randomizer out here. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to do a new logic connection on random trigger 1. We're going to invoke this action enforcer. And we're just going to have the player do something random. So for the first one, for example, we could do bloat, player 1. New logic connection on random trigger 2. We can do the trip. Player 1, have them trip. New logic connection, random trigger 3. We can have them do the shaving cream. A new logic connection on random trigger 4. And you can use any of these things out of here, but these are the ones that I chose that I thought were kind of potentially funny. We'll do the Fear Tech paint, player 1. And a new logic connection on random trigger 5. I think 5's enough. We'll do the shock. You can hook up more and do more effects if you want. Those are the ones that I thought might be interesting enough to be a joke that a monster might try. All right, so the player does that. Then we need the child's reaction. So we're going to do a new logic connection. When this is broken or collected, we're going to kick off this first time delayer. Actually, this one. Start that delay. And this one will leave at the default of 1 second. Okay? And a new logic connection on this time delayer. When that's completed, we're going to come over to our friendly wave generator, go to the friend generated options, play looped, and have the child sit up. Alright, now 2 seconds later, we'll have the result of this, because we want to give enough time for the player to watch Sully or Mike or whoever trip and fall or whatever they're going to do, watch the child's reaction, and then 2 seconds later we'll have the final result. And so on this, well, let's see, first of all we got to hook up to that. So on the green dungeon pickup, new logic connection, when that's broken or collected, we come over to our 2 second time delayer, start the delay. New logic connection on that. When the delay is completed, we're going to invoke the action enforcer here, this first one. And yeah, so what I want to have happen is I want 3 potential things to happen. So the player is going to have a 2 out of 3 chance for the joke to work. So on this, we'll do a new logic connection on random trigger 1. We'll come over to the sound effect generator, go to the vocal category, and do the laugh. And on random trigger 1, we'll invoke our second randomizer, and I'll explain that one in a moment. Now, random trigger 2, we will do the same thing. New logic connection on random trigger 2. Come over here and do the laugh. New logic connection on random trigger 2. We'll invoke this randomizer. The third one is for when the joke backfires. So a new logic connection on this first randomizer. On random trigger 3, we're going to actually make the child cry. That's going to let the player know that the joke didn't work. This is their feedback to let them know that. So we'll do crying. And that's all we're going to do on random trigger 3. Nothing else will happen. Now this second randomizer here on this chain will determine the scoring. So on random trigger 1, we're going to hook up 5 signals for this. So on random trigger 1, we'll come over here and we'll increment by 5 the score for player 1. Make that same connection for random triggers 2, 3, 4, and 5, but oops, over here. But have the score go up by 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, so the player for a joke can earn anywhere from 5 to 9 points. All right? And that takes care of the logic for this, for the joke. All right, and that room is done. Okay, so now do the exact same thing that I just did for this room, for the scare and for the joke. Hook that up for each of these other rooms. So again, this is going to be for player 1. This room is for player 2. So everywhere over here where I had selected player 1 to get the score and to activate the trigger areas and do all of that, you're going to do the same thing over here, but you're going to do it for player 2. And the same thing for this room. This is going to be for player 2. These are all going to hook up to these controls. So every room is basically identical. All right. The only difference is you're doing either player 1 or player 2. But the logic for each room is the exact same as that I did over here. You got the same controls duplicated here for each of the rooms. and you're going to hook those up. It's not difficult, it just takes time, and hopefully I've explained this well enough for you to be able to follow along with that. And that is it for the scare challenge. Once you hook up the logic for the other 3 bedrooms, you should be good to go. And again, just rewatch the video as I hook up the logic for the first bedroom. Do that same thing in the other bedrooms, and you should be fine. Next time, I'll show you how to hook up the logic for the stealth game in the warehouse. That logic is much simpler, so that'll be a shorter video. Until then, I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my video today, or at least found it helpful. I did my best to make the logic as easy to follow as possible, so before you go, leave a comment and let me know how I did. I'd also love to hear what you think of this game, and if you plan to try to recreate this game in your own toy box. Also, don't forget I have logic diagrams on my blog that will help you out with this challenge, and once again the link is in the video description. That's all for me today. Take care.